What's going on, everyone? It is the Conservative Christian back for another video, and today we are going to be talking about Pride Month again. That's right. We are in a series, I guess. Is this a series? We are in a state of being where I'm talking about Pride Month. Okay, so I'm heading to work right now. I haven't had breakfast because I'm recording this at 7:51 in the morning. Anyway, so come on, David, you got a video to make here. People are waiting. Alright, so yeah, Pride Month. So, what's on my mind with this? Let's see. So, Pride Month with the whole transgender issue, political issue, whatever you want to call it. Again, I think identity politics is garbage, and if you haven't heard what I have to say about that, see one of my previous videos. I think it was the first or the second one, or sorry, the second or third one, because the first one was my introduction, and I don't know if I actually talked about it in that video. Anyways, I guess I can give you a quick overview. If you're watching this video for the first time, I just want to say I think identity politics is mostly garbage. I think that I think it's healthy for us to have our groups of people that we hang out with, that we have something in common with, in general. But as a whole, I think it's what's called nationalism, essentially. I don't think anyone's really pushing for that, but I would think that would kind of be the extreme. But even if it's not something as extreme as nationalism, I still think that to some degree it can be unhealthy for us to only stick to our groups of people that we hang out with as a general rule. It creates this thing called groupthink, which essentially people don't grow from. Then of course we're now then introduced to these things called safe spaces, which essentially doesn't allow people really the opportunity or the chance to grow as a person. They get stuck in their safe space and in their whatever you want to call it, and they never learn, they never grow, and then of course they end up never moving out of it, and they expect everyone else to be in that same space with them. And of course, if they don't get their way, they start throwing tantrums, and they start trying to use the government as a club to which you've been seeing, label people or force people to do things that they want them to do. So as a whole, yeah, identity politics, I hate it. I don't like it. I think it robs people of being individuals. I think that it actually causes more division, actually, honestly. And so yeah, so transgenderism. This is gonna be a two-part. Well, it might be a two-parter, but I meant to say it's gonna be a two-sided story. I'm gonna have some theology in here with some politics. So let's do this. So transgenderism with the LGBTQ community has been around semi-recently, I would say, and obviously the whole point of it is that there are some people. That guy's got a nice bike. There are some people who think that they were born a certain gender to which they biologically are not. Now let me be very clear about this, because I feel like people are going to I feel like people should know this about me, because I think it'll show that I don't necessarily have a bias in this fight, although I still technically do. So when I was younger, growing up, I realized that I did have a lot more tendencies to I was more of a girl, so to speak, and I still kind of am to some degree. Like, I don't really care for sports. I don't really like cars. I mean, I like nice cars, but I'm not like enthralled with cars or motorcycles. Things that you would typically associate with a macho, muscular, a macho man. I mean, I still like working out. You probably can't tell because I'm a small dude, so it's really hard for me to get noticeable results. But I've never really been that masculine of a male. I've always typically been more feminine, so to speak, and so So I wanted to make sure that I made that very clear, because people are going to say, oh, you're a guy, you know, you can't, you know, for the sake of this video, I identify as a woman. So I'm just kidding. But so, and here's, I've heard a lot of things. I'm going to be citing some things that people have said to kind of establish my argument and see, you know, see if we can't find any common ground or whatever. But, you know, how you feel on the inside is completely irrelevant to what you physically are. And the fact that you're still alive right now watching this video, even as far back as your birth, is probably very important to that, especially if you're a guy. Because when you're an infant and you are born, doctors have to know. I found this out through another source. It's something that I looked up on my own. Although I'm sure you could find it. That when you're born, doctors have to determine your biological gender immediately to determine what kind of care you need. Because as it turns out, males, when they're born, they have a weaker immune system to start with, so they need a different kind of care. So it's bizarre to me that even right at birth, whether your doctor has assigned you the gender or not, they already have, because they've already said, hey, this is a male, he has a penis, or it's a female, it has a vagina. You know, they've had to determine that within the first 5 seconds of you being born to know what kind of care you need. And I just want to be fair and say, like, if you're someone, like, I want to make this very clear too, like, if you're someone out there who identifies as transgender or whatever, what have you, no one is saying that you're not a person. No one is threatening your identity. We just have an opinion on what you are. And again, this comes back to what I was talking about yesterday, that with homosexuality. What people like me really feel is that what people like you are asking for isn't rights, isn't decent treatment. It's acceptance. Because as it turns out, you're getting all of those things, unless you're one of those people who's actually going through something that you're not bringing forth. And you know, as much as it might suck for those of you watching, like, no one is obligated to accept your lifestyle. No one is accepted to, you know, to call you certain things. Now, obviously, this is me, and I think that a lot of other decent people out there would be willing to do the same. You know, our intention isn't to intentionally offend. And so, if I ever met someone who was transgender, I would try and just associate them with their name, not him or her or whatever, because, you know, I understand that I get it. It can be offensive to people, and if I know that it's offensive, I'll try and find a way around it. But here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to pretend along with you that you are something that I don't think that you are. If you are, you know, it really comes back to what I was talking about the last time in my last video with the homosexual movement, is that it's almost like this thing that has to be forced in everyone's face, and if we don't accept it, then we are labeled X, Y, or Z, you know, racist, transphobic, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, sorry, but, like, I respect you as another human being. I'm not denying you your humanity. I'm not saying that you're any less of a person just because I think that you're something that you're not. But if you're going to be one of those people who I can't even call you by your actual name, and you are going to insist that I have to call you by the gender that you think that you are, there's probably not going to be a friendship there. There's not going to be anything there. You know, I mean, if we can't even establish what we're going to call each other, there's really no point in even being friends, is my opinion. Now, there was a very interesting point that I think it was a psychologist. I'll have to probably cite their sources below on where I'm getting these things from. But I found out about this guy who made an observation stating that that transgenderism, people who are transgender have very similar ties and behaviors that kids do, in the sense that, you know, when we're kids, we want to play pretend, we want to be a dog, an elephant, an animal, maybe even sometimes a man or a woman, depending on what gender you are. I mean, I know I did. I mean, when I was younger, I think I dressed up as a girl like 1 or 2 times. I played Barbies with my sister, who's now dead of cancer at the time. But, you know, it's very interesting observation, because that really seems to be what it kind of seems to have a correlation to some degree, and especially in today's culture and society, it makes sense, because I feel like kids in general are being forced to grow up, and, you know, they don't get a chance to be a kid, and so because they don't get a chance to be a kid, their childhood has been put on hold, and there's, you know, well, almost close to adulthood, if not already, and they haven't been able to kind of be or experiment with, you know, their imagination. I don't know how much weight that holds. That was just a very interesting observation that the gentleman made, and I'll post that source below when I get a chance to it. It's very interesting. Now here's the thing that I really think that it is. You know, I mean, if we're talking about theology here, I mean, this, for people out there who believe in God, this really comes down to humanity just rejecting God at every possible turn. I mean, excuse me, if God said that He made human, you know, mankind male and female, then of course, what do you expect is going to happen? Everything that God has created is going to get perverted and twisted at some point. I mean, I'm waiting for the time in America where people are going to start pushing for, you know, their rights to have sex with and marry animals. We haven't gotten that far yet. And this is the funny thing, right? If you look at history, you know, the line just keeps getting pushed back farther and farther every single time. You know, once homosexuality came around, people were kind of skeptical about that, and then, you know, we kind of like said okay, and then now it's about transgenderism, and now we're like, well, okay, and then you know, what's next? You know, it seems like it's almost kind of like, you know, like the whole gun debate thing with oh, we don't want to take your guns, except that you do, because every single measure that you're proposing requires that all firearms be confiscated, basically. And it just seems to be like, it's almost like, I don't know what it is, but the point is that the line just constantly keeps getting pushed further and further back. And every time it's like, no, this is basically the context of it all is like, no, this is the last thing. Like, this is really just all what we want. And I'm waiting. I'm waiting for it, because I know it's going to happen. The only thing we still have yet to see are people wanting to have sex with other animals, or with animals, not other animals. And so, and here's the thing: like, there's a practical standpoint, and then there's a theological standpoint. Practically, transgenderism, from a practical standpoint, from a secular standpoint, I guess, is that it's technically a mental disease, in the sense that it's not so much the fact that people think that they are something that they're not, but that people who are transgender, there's a correlation between transgenderism and major depression. The depression is actually the cause, the main issue. It's just that it seems to just be that people who are transgender are just more naturally prone to having higher rates of depression. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think I briefly mentioned this in my last video too, where I essentially made the point, I'll make it again here. I think what that is, to some degree, is that when you grow up not knowing who you are or what you are, that's just naturally likely to cause depression. I mean, I know people, and I've been part of that too, when I was growing up, when I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, I didn't know who I wanted to be. I was slightly depressed, and I mean, I was even depressed just even recently. My entire 6 years in the military, I was constantly depressed because everything sucked. And you can argue that security forces sucks naturally by default because people in that job are just generally depressed. It's not the job necessarily. It's the same comparison. Security forces in and of itself is like being transgender. In and of itself, there isn't really I guess technically anything wrong with that. It's just that naturally being transgender, in the same sense that naturally being in security forces, people are more likely to be depressed because of what that entails. Let's see, where was I going with this? And so I just want to make that very clear, I guess. And so what I think it is, that's the practical standpoint. What I think it is, if we're talking theologically, I think that every identity politics group at some point obviously is about acceptance. People want to be loved. People want to be. People want to have friends, family, whatever you want, whatever. Because we're all tribal to some degree, even if it's just within our own families. And when people, I mean, I used to kind of be in a similar fashion, I think. It wasn't really that long ago. It was only a few years ago, probably. I would wear very childish clothing. Like I would wear a Cookie Monster hat with a Cookie Monster T-shirt, and I would wear that to church, and I would wear that around. And I don't really know why I did it. I have two theories, but I can't say that either one of them is 100% the reason. But one of the reasons was that I hadn't been at church in a while, and I had kind of just gotten out of another church a few years before, where there were a lot of cliques. Everything, people seemed to be kind of judgmental, and I was doing this as a sense. I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to go back to church, I'm going to see if this is a good one, because last time I went to church, I was kind of like an outcast, and I didn't really appreciate that. So I decided to. I think that that might have been part of it, at least part of it, where I did that to see if people were going to judge me for what I wore. But I also think at the same time that at the same time it was also an outreach for people to accept me, just as a person, not necessarily what I wore, but just as a person. I wore things that blatantly drew attention to myself because I wanted attention. I wanted to feel like I belonged. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted people to accept